Welcome to our bus series videos. We bought this bus a week ago and it came luckily with all the seats out of it, so we didn't have to take those out. We did all the tear down for the most part already. The floor is out, the ceiling is out. I got some time-lapse footage of that I'll show and talk about that a little bit.
Excuse this footage because it was out of focus and I didn't realize it till I was done. But the first thing I started doing here was taking off these panels on the roof, which were all just held in by screws. So that was really easy. And the next thing that I did move on to was starting to take the panels off of the roof. I knew these were going to be a little more difficult because those were held in by rivets, and those are a little more difficult to get out. I will say they were a lot harder, and I took one panel off and moved to the floor because I did not want to try to tackle even more. Each one of those ceiling panels is held on by 40 rivets that you basically have to rip out, and I just did not feel like tackling that day. So now you can see the ceiling is out in this time lapse. I did go back and do that. Unfortunately, my camera had died that day, so I was unable to time lapse the rest of taking the ceiling out. On this day, we just kind of started taking out the rest of the floor here and getting that ready. As we were pulling the floor up, we noticed that the wood underneath it was still in really good shape, which was great news because that means we didn't have to rip out the wood as well and replace that. We should be able to just put down our subfloor or whatever we need to put down on top of that in order to put our flooring in when we get to that phase later. Basically, we were just trying to gut the whole bus right now just so that way everything is done and ready to go to start building it up. So as you can see, the floor literally just kind of pulled up. It was like glued down by something, but it wasn't in there like too, it wasn't a huge pain to pull it out. So that was really nice for us. And as you can see at the front of the bus, there's like the backs of two seats. We also did remove those as well, just to kind of open the space. We didn't really have a need for them in there. So we did unbolt those and take those out. And actually pulling those out was quite the process because we started unbolting it and we didn't realize that there was actually a bolt underneath. It actually went through the entire floor, and I had to go underneath and hold those bolts to keep them from spinning so we could get them completely out. So that was fun, trying to crawl under the bus and find those bolts and figure out which ones were the right ones, because there's a lot of bolts underneath there, and definitely don't want to take the wrong ones out. So this is just kind of us doing that process, trying to figure that out and pulling those out there. And that pretty much concludes it. There are, as you can see on the left side there's two radiators, and that is how the bus heats the whole thing. It runs coolant down through those radiators, and we are not going to use that system, so we do need to pull those out, and that will be in the next video. We created a little loop. We're going to basically cut the hose and just loop it straight back up at the front of the bus and remove those two radiators.
So this is the bus. Like I said, it's gutted, floor's out, ceiling's out. We're pretty much at the point where we're just going to start building it up. On the inside, we still have to paint the outside, obviously, which Jordan earlier was working on taking all the reflective tape and stickers off of it. I think she's almost done with that. So like I had said earlier, all the seats were taken out, so that was a giant project that we didn't have to do. So the first thing we're going to start working on here is the ceiling and getting that installed. We have the ceiling on order, should be here in about a week and a half. But in the meantime, we're going to prep so that way when it gets here, we can just start putting it up. So what we're doing in order to attach the ceiling is I've got 1/2-inch plywood here, and what we did was we cut it 6 feet long, and we're running 4 stacked on top of each other to give us 2 inches here. And with that 2 inches, what that's going to allow us to do is put 2-inch foam insulation in here, and that's going to obviously allow us for try to keep heat in. With all these windows, we need to try to keep as much heat in as possible. Some of them will get blocked out after the build, but we want to try to make it as warm as possible, as energy efficient as possible. So this also doubles as allowing us to do the thicker insulation, also allows us something to mount the ceiling to instead of having to tie it into the metal here. It's going to be a lot easier to just mount it into this wood here. And anything else that we put up there, we have like some sort of rafter to screw into, so that's going to be really nice. Not the easiest to put in though.
Here's a time lapse of us putting up one of those sets of boards. As you can see, it's quite the process. We had to jack it up where we put each bolt in so that it would stay flush with the ceiling, and then we ran screws vertically into those boards as well to hold them all together to keep them from separating.
A little bit about the bus. We bought it from a guy in southern Minnesota. He had bought it from a school district about a year ago, but he had only put 1,000 miles on it. So it's basically just got retired out of a school district. It's in great condition for what it is. It only has 128,000 miles on it. It's a Freightliner, so it's built on a semi chassis. It's got a 5.9 Cummins diesel engine in it. Also has the Allison transmission. So we're really hoping to not have too many mechanical issues with this down the road, especially with the low miles that it has on it right now. Another thing that he did to this when he had it was he put this, we'll go back here quick, he put a gate in it, and from the outside you can't even, I mean you can tell it's there, but he did a really good job of putting it in. This gate actually flips down, and he used it to pull motorcycles in. He used this to transport motorcycles, but what we're gonna do is we're going to take this the flip part of the gate, we're going to take that off, put adjustable legs on it, and then flip it down. It's going to be like a fold down deck. So we're going to have our bedroom in the back here, and then when we want, we can just flip that down, and it's going to be like a deck, and you know, be able to enjoy the outdoors. It's going to be fantastic. So we just got done putting the ceiling in, putting the boards in that is going to hold the ceiling. This is what's going to allow us to do the 2-inch foam insulation along with mounting our ceiling to that. And in the corners here, we could not get the plywood, the plywood to bend that much. So the old man, you know, he got a little creative here and he went out and cut something like this. So these are just going to run over here, and we'll have a place to mount our ceiling and put our insulation in over here. So shout out to the old man. I mean, this bus build probably wouldn't be half as good as it is without him, so huge shout out to him. But pretty much that's going to be it. We put 13 of these in today, and they're bolted in with 5 bolts across, so it's quite the process. So yeah, that pretty much took us all day, probably 5 or 6 hours to get all those in. But now we're ready to insulate, throw some wires up there for the lights and the speakers. And then a week from Tuesday, we will be throwing in the ceiling. So that's it for this video. Next one will be painting and putting the ceiling in. So stay on the lookout for that one.